All right, ladies and gents. So, as we discovered yesterday during the live stream, Jalen Reagor, man, he got a tear in his shoulder. He's going to be out 3 to 4 weeks. This clearly has implications for the roster, guys. So let's talk about it, Joe. Let's jump into today's topic. What's up, Eagles Nation? What's going on, NFL world? How you doing, Division Rivals? This is Steven Hyder with Gate City Sports Channel, the sports channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever it is you get around to watching us. Once again, guys, my name is Steven Hyder, and this is Gate City Sports Channel. All right, y'all, let's talk about today's topic. Listen, Jalen Reagor, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. That to me, that's a pretty significant loss for a few weeks. At least it's only a few weeks here that we're dealing with, but nonetheless, Jalen Reagor is an explosive athlete. He's a guy that's very diverse in his game. He's a guy that can work the middle. He can work the outside. He can be a possession guy. He can do a lot. Losing him, come on, guys, it's not ideal. Like, there's no way of sugarcoating that and remaining like genuine. Like, then you're BSing, right? What I will say is this: I try to focus on, I try to focus on the positives. And I know there's really not a positive to losing Jalen Reagor for a few weeks, but I try to focus on the things that are within the control of the organization, within the control. You can't control injuries, guys. I mean, that's a really difficult thing to come around to. What I can focus on is, what does this do for the roster? I mean, Jalen Reagor being down for a few weeks certainly is going to probably bring up an interesting conversation about special teams production.
Yesterday during that walkthrough was just looking at the special teams and trying to get a sense of who
guys on the roster in terms of like how many you want to keep at a depth. Because before I thought it was a little argumentative to say the Eagles were going to keep 7 wide receivers, but now, it seems a little more likely. Because are you really going to start the season with Alshon and Reagor basically out for 3 to 4 weeks? I mean, those guys might not return until week 3, week 4, maybe even later. So, how are you going to begin the season? I mean, are you really going to roll into with just your starting 3, which would be, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Greg Ward Jr., and then you got, of course, Deshaun Jackson as your starting flanker. And then you got, essentially, John Hightower as your 4th guy and Quez Watkins. I mean, D-Jax has got some injury histories. We don't know, I like what I'm seeing from J.J. this camp. But, I mean, it's camp. It's not games. I mean, you got to be real about things. He hasn't done it in a game yet. I mean, I do like what I'm seeing. He looks definitely a little more polished. It looks like he has way more understanding of the offense this season. I've seen some positive encouragements from him, but I mean, the question becomes, really to me, is do you roll in with 5 and keep those 2 guys on your roster so you still really have 7, but you're really focusing on those 5 guys, running the risk of for 3 or 4 weeks, making sure nobody goes down? Or do you go really take a guy like Alshon Jeffrey and finally put him on the reserve pup, the inactive pup, basically? If you're on the active pup, guys, you're fine. Means that you still count against your team's 53-man roster, but you can be activated for game situations at any point. When you go on the reserve pup, that's when you go down for 6 to 8 weeks and you do not count against your team. Might this shape a decision like that when it comes to Alshon Jeffrey, right? Might this put a guy like Deontay Burnett onto the Eagles, 53-man roster now? Because Deontay Burnett has played very good in camp. He looks like he's deserving of a roster space. I mean, I think it's a legit conversation. The other conversation to have here is Jalen Reagor was taking a lot of first-team reps at punt return and kick return at times.
Dante Maddox and Rodney McLeod were both in the area, so you kind of saw a little bit of everything from JJ.
So let's talk about the conversation around that, because that's where a guy like Adrian Killins now becomes incredibly difficult to predict on or off the roster because of this Jalen Reagor situation. The thing is that when I look at explosiveness, with the ball in their hands, who has that sudden quick twitchness who can just absolutely juke somebody and gain yardage?
Part of my Eagles Insider podcast, which will drop tomorrow, his workout.
It's Reagor, it's Killins. Those guys are on a different level. I think past those 2 guys, I think Marcus Green definitely has a little bit of that ability to him too. But and you could talk about Marcus Green even being a 6th receiver on that roster. But I think Deontay Burnett has outperformed Marcus Green. And to Deontay Burnett's credit, guys, and I'll throw a picture up behind me. These are the guys in the room for punt returner. Okay, this is them coming off the field from special teams drills. Okay, you got everyone from Graylin Arnold to Avonte Maddox back there taking and fielding punts, to guys like Reagor, guys like Quez Watkins, guys like Killins. I mean, you know what I mean? Marcus Green. Like, this is a pretty big positional group here, guys, that are fielding these punts. Kickoff returns, you got everyone from Corey Clement to Marcus Green.
Yeah, it's a huge momentum swing. Whenever you can get a big play on special teams, those
to, you got guys like Adrian Killins doing it. We have guys, Reagor's done it. I mean, it definitely brings up a very interesting conversation in regards to who may or may not make the roster. I mean, I'm only really focusing on the singular aspect of the offense. You got a guy like Graylin Arnold, who also is an experienced punt returner.
Yeah, and he talked about, too, that this is usually the time of camp where the defense is usually ahead of the offense. And he
he's been competing. He's been pretty close to being the conversation and making this roster. Having a guy like Reagor go down, and now, say we're going to throw in a guy like, Greg Ward Jr. is going to be basically your punt returner because he's got experience.
Young receivers, hey, if I do this in the jam, this is how you try and beat me. If I do this, try and beat me this way.
Well, now you might want someone back there to back him up that can also contribute in other ways on special teams as a gunner, as different things. That might make sense for Graylin Arnold to fit on this roster now. So, like, the implication of the injury, it does have meaning, guys. I mean, it can legitimately push people onto the active 53-man roster now. In terms of like how it's going to affect the production, I think it gives a golden opportunity for a guy like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside to shine. Okay? I'm not saying J.J. Arcega-Whiteside will or won't be productive this year. I can't tell that until I can see it in games, guys, and I'll break down film, believe you me, when I see it. But he looks good in games.
So this is a very positive.
So, what can you do in games? You have a golden opportunity. Reagor and Alshon Jeffrey are on the